The alien princess stared at me and whispered, "I've been looking for you for years." Human Dr. Marcus Chen stood near the edge of the crystalline reception hall, trying not to look as overwhelmed as he felt. The walls of the Valkyrie Imperial Palace seemed to be made of living light, shifting through colors he didn't have names for. Above him, the vaulted ceiling displayed what he assumed was the Valkyrie home star system, rendered in such perfect detail that he could see solar flares dancing across the surface of their sun. It was beautiful, intimidating, and completely alien. Marcus had been a xenolinguist for 8 years, but this was his first time off Earth. Actually, it was humanity's first time making contact with a truly advanced alien civilization. The Valkyrie Empire had existed for over 50,000 years, while humans were still figuring out how to make fire. Their technology was so far beyond human understanding that the diplomatic vessel Harmony, humanity's most advanced ship, had been escorted to the Valkyrie homeworld like a child being walked to school. He adjusted his translator earpiece and watched the various delegations mingling. The human contingent, led by Ambassador Sarah Okonkwo, was trying very hard to look confident and cosmopolitan. They weren't entirely succeeding. The Valkyrie themselves were striking beings, tall and elegant with skin that seemed to shimmer with bioluminescent patterns. Their eyes were large and multifaceted like opals, and they moved with an unsettling grace that made Marcus think of dancers or predators, though he couldn't decide which. The whole summit was a minor miracle. For millennia, the Valkyrie had ignored the younger species of the galaxy, neither hostile nor friendly, just utterly indifferent. Then, 6 months ago, they had sent a message to Earth's solar system. Simple and direct, they wished to discuss a potential alliance. The diplomatic community had been scrambling ever since. Marcus wasn't supposed to be here at all. He was just a junior researcher in the linguistics department, someone who analyzed alien grammar structures and syntax patterns. But 3 weeks before the departure, Dr. Reeves, the chief xenolinguist, had suffered a heart attack. Marcus had been promoted to the delegation almost by accident, chosen because he had published a well-received paper on nonlinear communication methods. He still felt like an imposter among all these ambassadors and military advisors. He was contemplating finding somewhere quiet to review his notes when the hall seemed to shift. It wasn't a physical movement, more like the entire room had collectively turned its attention to something. Marcus followed the gazes and saw her. She was Valkyrie, clearly, but even among her own people she stood out. Where most Valkyrie wore flowing robes in muted colors, she wore deep midnight blue that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Intricate silver patterns wound up her arms and throat, markings that Marcus had learned indicated high social rank. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed in shades of violet and gold, creating an effect that was almost hypnotic. Ambassador Okonkwo leaned toward Marcus and whispered, "That's Princess Lyrakai, third in line to the throne. She's supposed to be their greatest living scholar. Published over 300 research papers before she was 30, by their calendar." The princess was moving through the crowd with purpose, and dignitaries from a dozen species were trying to catch her attention. She ignored them all. Her large, opalescent eyes were fixed on something across the hall. They were fixed on him. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He looked behind him, certain she must be looking at someone else, but there was only a decorative pillar made of that strange living crystal. When he turned back, she was closer, cutting through the crowd with single-minded determination. Other delegates stepped aside, some bowing, others simply moving out of her way with the instinctive deference people showed royalty. She stopped directly in front of him. Up close, she was taller than he'd realized, nearly 7 feet, but the height difference didn't feel threatening. Her luminescent patterns had shifted to a steady, pulsing gold, and her eyes were wider than before, as if she was as surprised as he was. "You," she said, and her voice was like music, even filtered through the translator's mechanical rendering. "I know you." The cultural briefing had been unclear about proper etiquette when addressing Valkyrie royalty directly. He settled for a respectful nod. "Your Highness, I'm Dr. Marcus Chen with the human delegation. I'm honored to meet you, but I think there's been some mistake. I've never been to Valkyrie space before." Her hand lifted as if to touch his face, then stopped, remembering perhaps that they were surrounded by hundreds of onlookers. "I've been looking for you for years, human," she whispered, and the translator captured every nuance of longing in her voice. The reception hall, which had been filled with the gentle hum of conversation, went completely silent. Marcus was aware of Ambassador Okonkwo stiffening beside him, of security officers subtly moving closer, of what felt like every eye in the room turning toward them. "I'm sorry," Marcus said carefully, "but I don't understand. We've never met." She reached into a fold of her robe and pulled out a small crystalline device, no larger than a coin. "Do you recognize this?" 12 of your years ago," Lyra said, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "Our deep space monitoring stations detected a derelict spacecraft at the edge of our territory. It was human-made, though we did not know of your species then. Inside, we found this." She held up the crystal. "It contained messages, mathematical proofs, scientific data, solutions to problems we had been struggling with for decades." Marcus saw himself, or someone who looked exactly like him, but younger, maybe 19 or 20 years old. The image Marcus was gaunt, exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. He was speaking directly to the camera. "If anyone finds this," the image said, "please, you have to help them. The Valkyrie homeworld is dying. I don't know if this will reach them in time, but I have to try. I've compiled everything I could figure out. The atmospheric equations, the ecological models, everything. They're good people. They deserve a chance." That was definitely him, or someone with his exact face, his exact voice, but he had no memory of this. None at all. "That recording saved my world," Lyra continued, and now Marcus could hear the emotion clearly in her voice. "The solutions you provided, the insights into our ecological crisis, they worked. We implemented your recommendations and our atmosphere stabilized. Billions of lives were saved. My life was saved. And I swore that day that I would find the human who had given us this gift and ask them one simple question. Why?" "Your Highness," the ambassador said diplomatically, "there must be some mistake. Dr. Chen has never left Earth's solar system before this mission. Our records are very clear on this." It was deeper, colder, and carried unmistakable authority. "Sister, what is the meaning of this display?" Even without the briefing materials, Marcus would have recognized power when he saw it. "Prince Thuron," Okonkwo murmured. "Crown Prince, this is bad." "I am greeting an old friend, brother. Surely that is not forbidden, even at a diplomatic function." "Either you are mistaken, sister, or someone is lying. Neither possibility is acceptable at a peace summit. This is the human who saved our world 12 years ago. That your mysterious benefactor might have been the first move in a much longer game. They had come here to build bridges, and now humanity's representative was being accused of espionage by the crown prince of the Valkyrie Empire." "That's absurd," Marcus said, finding his voice. "I don't know what that recording is or how it exists, but I can prove I wasn't in Valkyrie space 12 years ago. I was on Earth. I have records, witnesses, everything. Detain this human for questioning. We will get to the truth of this matter. I invoke my right as a princess of the blood to grant him sanctuary." "Think carefully, sister." This was about politics, about power, about the future of human-Valkyrie relations. And somehow, impossibly, he was at the center of it. Ambassador Okonkwo stepped forward. "Perhaps we can resolve this calmly. Dr. Chen is willing to cooperate with any reasonable investigation. We want the truth as much as you do. And sister," he turned to Lyra, "if you are wrong about this, the consequences will be severe." He was staring at Lyra, who was looking at him with an expression he couldn't decipher. "I know this makes no sense to you," she said softly, "but I promise you we will find the truth, together." Somewhere in his past was a mystery he didn't remember, a journey he never took, and a connection to this alien princess that defied explanation. And he had the sinking feeling that his life would never be simple again. The palace guest quarters were more luxurious than any hotel Marcus had ever seen on Earth, but he barely noticed the floating light fixtures or the walls that changed color based on his mood. He sat on the edge of what he assumed was a bed, though it felt more like sleeping on a cloud, and stared at his hands. They were the same hands he had always known, with the small scar on his left thumb from a childhood accident and the callus on his right middle finger from holding pens too tightly. These were his hands. This was his body. So why did he feel like a stranger to himself? Ambassador Okonkwo had spent 2 hours in an emergency meeting with the human delegation. trying to contain the diplomatic fallout from the evening's events. The official position was that there had been some kind of misunderstanding, that the Valkyrie had made an identification error. But Marcus had seen his own face in that holographic recording, had heard his own voice speaking words he had never said. That wasn't a case of mistaken identity. A soft chime announced a visitor. Marcus stood as the door dissolved into light, revealing Princess Lyrakai. She was alone this time, without guards or attendants, and she looked somehow smaller without an audience. Her bioluminescent patterns were a muted silver, which Marcus was learning meant uncertainty or anxiety. "I apologize for the informality," she said, stepping inside as the door reformed behind her. "But we do not have much time. My brother is already assembling investigators, and once they begin their official inquiry, speaking privately will become impossible. Can you show me everything?" Marcus saw the derelict spacecraft, a design he recognized as human but more advanced than anything currently in service. The hull was scorched and damaged, as if it had barely survived some catastrophic event. "We found it here," Lyra indicated a star map, "approximately 200 light-years from Valkyra Prime in what you would call the Sagittarius Arm. It was drifting, no power, no life support. When our salvage team boarded, they found it had been abandoned for weeks, maybe months, but the data core was intact. And everywhere handwritten notes covering the walls. Mathematical equations, diagrams, desperate calculations. Marcus recognized his own handwriting. The messages were addressed to the Valkyrie," Lyra continued. "You knew our name, our location, even details about our ecological crisis that we had not shared beyond our own borders. You provided atmospheric restoration formulas that our best scientists had been unable to derive. You gave us everything we needed to save our world, and then you vanished. This doesn't make sense. I'm a linguist, not an atmospheric scientist. I couldn't have written these. We kept them preserved, not knowing if we would ever need them. When I saw you tonight, I had them compare your DNA to our samples. It is a perfect match, Marcus. That ship was yours. I've never left Earth's solar system. My entire life is documented. School records, work history, everything. There's no gap where I could have disappeared for months and traveled 200 light-years away." A memory flickered at the edge of his consciousness, fragmented and uncertain. He pressed his palms against his temples, trying to grasp it, but it slipped away like water through his fingers. "I need to contact my family," he said. "There might be something I'm forgetting, something that didn't seem important before. I will give you privacy." When the holographic image finally stabilized, Marcus saw his sister Alina's face, pixelated slightly from the distance but unmistakably surprised. "Marcus, it's 3 in the morning here. Are you okay? We saw the news coverage of the summit, something about an incident." "Why are you asking about that?" "You really don't remember, do you? The doctors said you might not, that the trauma could have caused permanent memory loss. You volunteered for it right after your 19th birthday. It was supposed to be a routine 6-week survey of the outer asteroid belt, gathering data for mining operations. The ship was called the Pioneer's Hope, one of those experimental solo craft they were testing. No distress signal, no debris, nothing. They searched for weeks but found no trace. Mom and Dad were devastated. I was furious with you for volunteering for something so dangerous." She paused, and Marcus could see tears forming in her eyes. "Then, 6 months later, you came back. The doctors said you'd been through something catastrophic, but you couldn't remember any of it. When they asked what happened, you just stared at them. You'd lost months of your life and had no idea where you'd been." Around him, Lyra's holographic displays were adjusting automatically, pulling up medical records, mission files, things he had never thought to look at because he hadn't known they existed. "The official report said equipment malfunction," Alina said. "The ship's experimental jump drive had misfired, sending you into some kind of subspace pocket where time moved differently. They estimated you'd experienced years subjectively while only months passed for us. The temporal radiation had scrambled your memories, and the neurologists said trying to force them back could cause permanent brain damage. So they sealed the mission files, gave you medical leave, and told you to move forward with your life. After the first few weeks of therapy, you said you preferred not remembering. You said it was like that time had happened to someone else and you wanted to leave it buried. We respected that. Was that wrong?" Thank you for telling me now. If your ship's drive malfunctioned, you could have been sent years into your own future while experiencing those years normally. That would explain how you traveled so far, how you learned so much, and why only months passed on Earth. She manipulated the holographic controls, and new images appeared. These are the complete message files from your ship. I have not shared all of them publicly because some were personal, not scientific. I thought when I found you, you would want to see them yourself first. If anyone is watching this, I guess I should explain how I got here. The jump drive did malfunction, just like the emergency logs will show. But it didn't send me to some empty corner of space. It sent me to a Valkyrie colony world called Threshold. I crashed badly. The ship was destroyed. I should have died. Her name is Lyrakai, and she saved my life. My translator was damaged, and her people don't use verbal language the way humans do. But she's brilliant. We started with mathematics, then physics, then chemistry, universal constants that work the same for everyone. It took weeks, but we began to understand each other. She told me about her doctoral research, about the atmospheric crisis facing Valkara Prime. Her people were too proud to ask for outside help, assuming they even knew other intelligent species existed. But she was desperate. Her family was there, her friends, billions of people who would die if they didn't find a solution. I had to try to help. We worked together for months, combining what I knew of human atmospheric science with her deep understanding of Valkyrie ecology. We found answers neither of us could have reached alone. All of it. I could go with her, try to explain everything to her people, hope they would believe a human and help me get home. But that would take months, maybe years of diplomacy, and I'd seen the projections. Valkara Prime didn't have years. The shuttle isn't rated for the distance, and I'm pretty sure the jump will kill me or leave me stranded. But if there's even a chance this data reaches the right people in time, it's worth it. But we both knew there wasn't time. So I'm leaving this recording, all these files, everything we discovered together. If it doesn't reach Valkara Prime, maybe someone else will find it someday and learn something useful. And if it does reach them, if her world survives, then I need whoever finds this to promise me something. That the universe is bigger and stranger and more wonderful than either of our species imagined. Tell her that meeting her changed everything I thought I knew about what was possible. And tell her that I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye properly. Marcus and Lyra stood in silence, surrounded by the ghosts of their younger selves. You did say goodbye, Lyra said quietly. We had an entire night. You told me about Earth, about oceans and forests and cities full of humans. I told you about Valkara Prime, about our crystal gardens and quantum libraries. We promised that if we ever met again, we would remember that night. Then we will help you remember, Lyra said firmly. There are Valkyrie medical techniques, memory restoration procedures that can recover even damaged neural pathways. It is risky but possible. Lyra's patterns flashed red in alarm. What is that? Marcus asked. Lyra was already moving toward the door, checking a device on her wrist. My brother, he has called for an emergency session of the Imperial Council. He is demanding a formal investigation into you, into our contact, into everything. If he succeeds in portraying you as a spy, as someone who manipulated me, it could destroy any chance of human-Valkyrie cooperation. We need to show them the truth. They will see a human who conveniently forgot his past, and they will assume deception. Whatever the risks, whatever it takes, how do we do this? The process could restore your memories completely, or it could damage them further or worse. Your personality, your identity, everything that makes you who you are now could be overwritten by who you were then. The human mind was not designed to hold two complete sets of memories for the same period of time. Then he thought about the younger version of himself, alone and determined, risking everything to save people he barely knew. That person is still me, he said. Just a version of me I forgot, and right now he's the only one who can stop a war. Let's do it. Then we move quickly before my brother can stop us. I will prepare the medical facility. But Marcus, you should know that if this works, if you remember everything, you will also remember why you chose to forget. The temporal radiation did not randomly destroy your memories. The medical records your sister mentioned show that the damage was too specific, too localized. Somewhere in your lost time, something happened that your mind could not bear to remember. The amnesia was not an accident. it was protection. But the choice is yours. Then let's find out what I was so afraid to remember. The medical facility was hidden deep within the palace, far from the public halls and diplomatic chambers. Lyra led Marcus through corridors that seemed to shift and change as they walked, the palace architecture responding to her biometric signature. They passed no guards, no servants, no one who might report their movements to Prince Thuron or the council. Marcus got the impression that Lyra had done this before, sneaking through her own home to avoid unwanted attention. The facility itself looked nothing like a hospital. The walls were the same living crystal as the rest of the palace, but here they pulsed with a steady rhythm that reminded Marcus of a heartbeat. Medical equipment that he couldn't begin to identify floated in suspension fields, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and something else, something organic and unfamiliar. A Valkyrie physician was waiting for them, an elderly female with patterns that barely glowed, faded to pale silver with age. She bowed slightly to Lyra, then turned her multifaceted eyes to Marcus with open curiosity. "So this is the human who saved our world," she said, her voice like wind through crystal chimes. "I am healer Sharon. Princess Lyra has explained what you wish to attempt. I must tell you that I have never performed a memory restoration on a human before. Our neurology is similar in some ways, but vastly different in others. I cannot guarantee success or even survival. Perhaps 70% you survive with some memories restored. 20% you survive but with significant neural damage. 10% you do not survive at all. These are estimates based on Valkyrie physiology. Human brains may respond differently. The recordings, the DNA match the ship itself. It might be enough." Chen was a deep-cover agent sent to infiltrate Valkyrie society through the princess. The council members who fear outside contact are eager to believe him. How could Earth have planned this when we didn't even know the Valkyrie existed 12 years ago? Those who wish to remain isolated will accept any explanation that justifies their position. Marcus's memories are the only thing that can show the truth of what happened, show that our connection was genuine and not some elaborate scheme. He thought about his sister's words, about the doctors who had told him that forcing the memories could cause permanent damage. They had been trying to protect him. Now he was choosing to do exactly what they had warned against. "Let's do it," he said, "before I lose my nerve." They were warm and slightly sticky against his skin. "The process will feel strange," Sharon explained as she worked. "We are going to stimulate the damaged neural pathways with precisely calibrated energy pulses. Think of it like tracing a path through a forest that has become overgrown. We are clearing away the undergrowth so you can walk the path again." But psychological pain? That I cannot prevent. Memories exist for a reason, and sometimes they are buried for equally valid reasons. No matter what happens, you are not alone. Then the tingling intensified, spreading through his skull like effervescent bubbles in champagne. The medical facility began to blur around him, the crystalline walls becoming indistinct, and then he was falling. Not physically, but mentally, plummeting backward through his own timeline. He saw himself at the summit, saw the human delegation boarding the Harmony, saw years of research and study and normal life rewinding like a recording played in reverse. And then he hit a wall, a barrier of static and confusion that marked the point 6 months after his 19th birthday when he had returned from the void with no memories. The barrier hurt. It was like pressing against broken glass, sharp edges that cut and tore. Marcus wanted to pull back, to retreat to the safety of his known memories, but Sharon's energy pulses pushed him forward, forcing him through. The wall shattered. Marcus gasped as memories flooded back, years of experiences crashing into his consciousness like a tsunami. He saw the Pioneer's Hope, his ship, felt the excitement of his first solo deep space mission. He was 19 and invincible and absolutely certain that nothing could go wrong. Then the jump drive malfunctioned. The universe inverted. Space and time became meaningless concepts as he was torn through dimensions that human mathematics couldn't describe. He should have died. The ship should have been ripped apart on a molecular level. But somehow, impossibly, he emerged intact in normal space, near a planet that glowed with bioluminescent forests and crystal mountains. The crash was violent. The Pioneer's Hope was never designed for atmospheric entry, and it came apart on the way down. Marcus remembered fire and screaming alarms and the horrible certainty that he was going to die alone on an alien world that humanity didn't even know existed. But he survived. And then he saw her. Lyra was younger in his memories, her patterns less controlled, more vibrant. She had been conducting geological surveys in a remote region when she detected the crash. She found him in the wreckage, pinned under debris, bleeding from a dozen injuries. By all rights, she should have left him. Her people had no protocols for dealing with alien life forms, no reason to risk herself for a creature she didn't understand. But she stayed. The memories came faster now, weeks compressing into moments. Lyra dragging him from the wreckage. Setting up a shelter in a cave while his injuries healed. The frustration of trying to communicate with no common language, no shared reference points. Drawing in the dirt, gesturing, acting out concepts until slowly, painfully, they began to understand each other. Mathematics was their first real connection. Numbers were universal, and equations didn't care what language you spoke. Marcus showed her the Pythagorean theorem, and Lyra showed him Valkyrie geometric proofs that made human mathematics look like children's games. From there, they moved to physics, to chemistry, to the underlying principles that governed both their people's understanding of the universe. Marcus saw himself learning to read Valkyrie script, the flowing symbols that represented concepts rather than sounds. He saw Lyra learning to speak human languages, her voice awkward at first but growing more confident. They spent months together, isolated from both their civilizations, and in that isolation they became friends. Then Lyra told him about Valkyra Prime. The memory was sharp and painful. Lyra showing him the data she had received from her homeworld, the atmospheric readings that showed cascading ecological collapse. Carbon dioxide levels rising exponentially, temperature fluctuations increasing. Ocean acidification destroying marine ecosystems. The Valkyrie had the technology to survive in artificial habitats, but their culture was deeply tied to their world. Losing Valkyra Prime would destroy them as surely as losing Earth would destroy humanity. Marcus saw himself becoming obsessed with the problem. He had no formal training in atmospheric science, but he had access to all of human knowledge in the Pioneers' Hopes database, everything that had survived the crash. He studied 18 hours a day, sleeping only when exhaustion forced him to, driven by a desperate need to help. And Lyra worked beside him, contributing her own expertise, her understanding of Valkyrie biology and ecology. Together, they found connections that neither species had seen alone. Human Industrial Revolution solutions combined with Valkyrie quantum chemistry. Atmospheric processors that could be built with existing Valkyrie technology, but designed using principles that human engineers had developed. It was beautiful and desperate and collaborative in a way that transcended species. The memories shifted. Marcus saw himself and Lyra sitting on a cliff edge, watching the bioluminescent forests glow in the darkness. They were exhausted but excited. The equations worked. The solutions were sound. They had done it. "We need to get this information to Valkyra Prime," Lyra had said, her patterns glowing soft blue in the darkness. "The supply ship arrives in 3 days. I can take the data back with me, present it to the Council of Sciences." Months, perhaps years. The Council moves slowly, especially with revolutionary ideas. They will want to verify everything, run simulations, build prototypes. By the time they implement the solutions. She hadn't finished the sentence. They both knew the timeline. Marcus saw himself making the decision. The colony has an emergency shuttle. It's not rated for long-distance jumps, but it could reach the core territories if I push it hard enough. The shuttle's jump drive isn't designed for distances that great. The temporal radiation alone would be lethal, even if you survived the jump itself. If I leave tomorrow, I could have the data to your homeworld in weeks instead of months. They had gone back and forth for hours until finally Lyra had asked the question that mattered. Why would you do this? Risk your life for people you have never met, for a world that is not your own. Because it's the right thing to do, because I can help, so I should help, because, he had paused, looking at Lyra's glowing patterns in the darkness. Because you asked me to, and that's enough. They had talked through the darkness, sharing everything they could think of. Marcus told Lyra about Earth, trying to describe oceans and forests and the organized chaos of human cities. Lyra told him about Valkyra Prime, about crystal gardens that sang in the wind and libraries where knowledge was stored in quantum matrices. If this works, Lyra had said as the sun began to rise, if you somehow survive and we both make it through this, promise me something. That humans and Valkyrie can work together, can be friends, can care about each other's survival. Promise me that when our peoples finally meet, you will help them see what we have seen. The shuttle jump was exactly as bad as they had feared. Marcus watched his younger self strapping into the pilot's seat, loading all their research into the shuttle's data core, preparing for a jump that would probably kill him. The launch was smooth, but the jump itself was agony. Space-time tore around him. The temporal radiation was like fire in his neurons, burning away pieces of himself. He felt his mind fragmenting, memories scattering like leaves in a hurricane. He was dying, he knew that, but the shuttle was still flying, still jumping toward Valkyrie space, carrying the data that could save billions of lives. When he finally emerged from the jump, he was more dead than alive. The shuttle was failing, systems cascading into failure. He had just enough consciousness left to record his final messages, to explain everything, to beg whoever found the data to use it to save Valkyra Prime. Then he programmed the shuttle to continue on its trajectory and launched himself in the emergency escape pod back toward human space. The pod's jump drive was even worse than the shuttle's. Marcus felt his mind shattering completely under the temporal radiation. In those final moments before unconsciousness, he understood what was happening. His brain was trying to protect itself the only way it could, by sealing away the memories that were being destroyed by radiation, by creating walls around the damaged sections so the destruction wouldn't spread. He was choosing to forget because remembering would kill him. The last thing he remembered from that time was Lyra's face, her patterns glowing gold in the darkness, and the promise he had made. Then there was nothing but static and pain and the long fall into darkness. Marcus opened his eyes. He was back in the medical facility, Lyra's hand still gripping his, Sharon monitoring the equipment with focused intensity. But everything was different now. He remembered all of it. The crash, the months on threshold, the desperate work to save a world he had never seen, the friendship that had grown into something deeper, and the sacrifice he had chosen to make. "Lyra," he said, and his voice cracked. I remember you. I found nothing for years. I thought you had died making that jump. Your brain's self-protective mechanisms are more sophisticated than I anticipated. But the memories are restored now, integrated with your current neural patterns. You should have full recall. Lyra's communicator chimed urgently and her patterns flashed to alarmed red. What is it? Marcus asked. Lyra checked her device, her expression darkening. My brother, he has discovered where we are. He is coming here now with council guards. She looked at Sharon. Can we move, Marcus? Prince Thuron strode in, flanked by a dozen guards in ceremonial armor, their weapons visible but not drawn. Behind them came several Valkyrie in ornate robes, members of the Imperial Council. And behind them, looking worried and angry in equal measure, was Ambassador Okonkwo and several human security officers. Step away from the human, sister, Thuron commanded. This has gone far enough. We have found the truth, Thuron, the truth you have been so desperate to suppress. This human has fed you lies, convinced you of a past that never happened, all to infiltrate our society. We can verify everything with neural pattern analysis, with timeline reconstructions. The data crystal was his, the ship was his, the sacrifice that saved our world was his. Even if what you say is true, Princess, it changes nothing. This human kept his connection to you secret. He came to our world knowing he had been here before, knowing he had a relationship with you. That deception alone is grounds for permanent exile from Valkyrie space. My brain sealed them away to save my life. The neural scans show clear evidence of radiation-induced damage, precisely targeted at the memory centers. The damage patterns are consistent with his story. No human technology could fake this level of detail. What exactly are you suggesting, Prince Thuron? That Earth sent a 19-year-old kid on a suicide mission to a planet we didn't know existed, to save a civilization we had never heard of, all as part of some elaborate scheme that wouldn't pay off for over a decade. That's not just improbable, it's impossible. You want proof? Marcus said, looking directly at Thuron. Fine. The data crystal contained more than just atmospheric equations. There were personal recordings, things only Lyra and I would know. Ask her about the night before I left, about what we talked about on the cliff edge while watching the bioluminescent forests. Ask her about the promise we made to each other. We promised that we would show our peoples what was possible when different species chose cooperation over fear. We promised that our friendship would be proof that the universe was bigger and better when shared. But words are not evidence. Displaying another being's memories is considered deeply invasive in our culture. It is not done lightly. Your memories, your privacy. But understand that once viewed, these memories cannot be unseen. You are exposing your most vulnerable self to judgment. But these were not recordings. These were memories, raw and unfiltered, pulled directly from his restored neural patterns. The council members, Prince Thuron, Ambassador Okonkwo, everyone in the room watched in silence as Marcus's memories played out before them. They saw the crash, saw Lyra saving his life, saw weeks and months of struggle and discovery and friendship. They saw two young beings from different species learning to trust each other, to work together, to care about each other's survival. And they saw the decision Marcus had made, to risk everything for people he had never met, for a world that was not his own because someone he cared about had asked him to help. When the memories finally ended, the room was silent. Several of the council members had tears on their faces. Even Thuron's aggressive red patterns had dimmed to uncertain amber. It was the ancient council member who spoke first. I have lived for 3 centuries. I have seen much in that time. But I have never seen anything quite like this. He looked at Marcus with something that might have been respect. You are either the greatest fool in the galaxy or the greatest hero, perhaps both. I'm just someone who tried to help a friend. This was one individual making an extraordinary sacrifice for altruistic reasons. To punish, that would shame us all. But then Thuron's shoulders slumped slightly, and his patterns faded to resigned blue. Very well, Thuron said. I concede that Dr. Chen's actions 12 years ago were genuine, but that does not resolve the current situation. He still kept his connection to my sister secret, even if unknowingly. The question remains, what do we do now? Marcus realized that the hardest part was just beginning. They had proven the past was real. Now they had to figure out what that meant for the future without short heading. 0358. The Valkyrie Council members occupied elevated platforms arranged in a circle around the chamber's center. Their bioluminescent patterns creating a constantly shifting display of colors that Marcus was only beginning to understand. Princess Lyrakai stood in the center of the chamber, alone, as Valkyrie custom demanded when one addressed the council. Her patterns were steady gold, determined and unafraid. Prince Thuron sat among the council members, his expression unreadable, his patterns a neutral silver that gave nothing away. The Empress herself presided over the session. She was ancient even by Valkyrie standards, her patterns faded to the palest gold, but her presence commanded absolute attention. When she spoke, her voice resonated through the chamber with quiet authority. We have reviewed the evidence presented by Princess Lyrakai and Dr. Marcus Chen, the Empress said. We have seen the neural scans, the memory recordings, the data from the derelict spacecraft. The facts are not in dispute. 12 years ago, a human saved our world at great personal cost, asking nothing in return. The question now before this council is simple. What does this mean for the future of Valkyrie-human relations? One of the elder council members, a male with deep purple patterns, spoke up. Your Majesty, while we are grateful for what Dr. Chen did, we must consider the broader implications. He has proven that humans are capable of extraordinary acts of compassion. But he has also proven that humans can reach our space undetected, can learn our secrets, can influence our civilization. Some might say his actions, however noble, represent a security breach of the highest order. Murmurs of agreement rippled through some sections of the council. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Even saving their world wasn't enough for some of them. Another council member, female with bright azure patterns, countered. And what would you have us do, Councillor Zethrin? Punish generosity, condemn compassion. We asked the galaxy why we should emerge from our isolation, why we should trust younger species. Dr. Chen has given us an answer written in sacrifice and dedication. If we reject that, we reject our own values. We reject nothing, Zethrin responded. We simply advocate caution. One noble human does not prove that all humans are trustworthy. The princess's emotional attachment to Dr. Chen may be clouding her judgment about his entire species. Lyra's patterns flared brighter. My judgment is not clouded, counselor. It is informed by direct experience, which is more than most of this council can claim. I have worked beside a human, learned from him, taught him in return. I have seen firsthand what our peoples can accomplish together. Dismissing that as mere emotion is intellectually dishonest. The Empress raised a hand, and silence fell immediately. Princess Lyrakai, you have advocated strongly for this alliance since we first proposed it. But Counselor Zethrin raises a fair point. Your personal connection to Dr. Chen, while now explained, does create the appearance of bias. How can we be certain that your enthusiasm for human cooperation is based on objective assessment rather than personal sentiment? Lyra was silent for a moment, and Marcus saw her patterns shift through several colors before settling back to gold. You cannot be certain, Your Majesty. Personal experience always influences judgment. But I would argue that my connection to Dr. Chen makes me more qualified, not less, to assess human character. I have seen humanity at its best and have no reason to believe Marcus is an outlier. The values he demonstrated, the choices he made, they come from somewhere. They come from a culture that, despite its flaws, teaches its children that helping others matters more than personal safety. Ambassador Okonkwo stood. Your Majesty, if I may speak. The Empress gestured permission. I understand the Council's concerns, Okonkwo said, her voice steady and diplomatic. You are ancient, powerful, and have survived millennia by being cautious. Humanity is young, chaotic, and yes, sometimes reckless. We make mistakes. We fight among ourselves. We are far from perfect, but we are also capable of incredible growth, of learning from our errors, of choosing cooperation even when it would be easier to choose conflict. She gestured to Marcus. Dr. Chen's actions 12 years ago were not authorized by Earth. He was a teenager alone and terrified who chose to help because it was the right thing to do. That is the essence of humanity. We do not always make the correct choices, but we try. We reach out. We build bridges. And yes, sometimes those bridges collapse, but we build them again, better and stronger. That is what we are offering the Valkyrie, not perfection but genuine partnership. Thuron finally spoke, his voice cutting through the chamber. Beautiful words, Ambassador. But partnership requires trust, and trust requires transparency. Dr. Chen kept his connection to my sister secret. Because he didn't remember it, Marcus said, standing up before Okonkwo could stop him. Prince Thuron, I know you don't trust me. Maybe you never will. But everything that happened 12 years ago happened because I crashed on a planet I never intended to reach. The Pioneer's hope was supposed to survey asteroids, not make first contact with an alien civilization. What followed was improvisation, desperation, and luck. He looked around the chamber, meeting the multifaceted eyes of the council members. I'm not a hero. I'm not a spy. I'm a linguist who got lost in space and was saved by someone who didn't have to save me. When I learned that her world was dying, I did what any decent person would do. I tried to help. That's all. And if that makes me dangerous to you, if compassion and cooperation are threats to Valkyrie security, then maybe this alliance was doomed from the start. The chamber fell silent. Marcus realized he had probably just destroyed humanity's best chance at an alliance with the most advanced civilization in the known galaxy, but he was too tired to care. He was tired of politics, of suspicion, of having his motives questioned. The Empress studied him for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, her patterns shifted to warm gold and she began to laugh. It was a sound like wind chimes, delicate and musical. Forgive me, she said as her laughter subsided, but I have just realized something. We have spent centuries debating whether to reveal ourselves to younger species, agonizing over protocols and procedures and proper diplomatic frameworks. And in the end, first contact happened because a human teenager crashed on one of our colony worlds and my daughter pulled him from the wreckage. The universe has a sense of humor. She stood, and immediately every Valkyrie in the chamber bowed. I have made my decision. The alliance with humanity will proceed, not because of political calculations or strategic advantages, but because 12 years ago a human proved that our peoples can work together, can trust each other, can care about each other's survival. That is a foundation worth building upon, Zethrin protested. Your Majesty, the security concerns are valid, the Empress interrupted, which is why we will proceed carefully with proper safeguards and protocols, but we will proceed. Counselor Zethrin, your faction has spent decades arguing that the younger species are too violent, too aggressive, too dangerous to engage with. And yet when given the opportunity to destroy Dr. Chen's ship to let him die alone and unnoticed on threshold, my daughter chose mercy. When given the opportunity to steal Valkyrie technology, to sell our secrets to his government, Dr. Chen chose to help us instead. These are not the actions of dangerous beings. These are the actions of people worth knowing. She turned to Lyra. My daughter, you have hidden this truth from me for 12 years. You have risked your position, your safety, your future for this alliance. Why? Lyra's patterns shimmered with emotion. Because Marcus showed me what was possible, Mother. He showed me that the universe is full of people who will surprise you, who will challenge your assumptions, who will prove that connection is stronger than isolation. I have spent 12 years studying humanity, learning their languages and their cultures and their histories. They are brilliant and flawed and fascinating. They deserve a chance to join the galactic community, and we deserve the opportunity to learn from them. The Empress moved down from her platform, approaching Marcus directly. Up close, she was smaller than he had expected, barely taller than him, but her presence was immense. Dr. Chen, she said softly, you saved my world. You saved my daughter's life, though not in the way I first understood. You gave us a gift we can never fully repay. But we can honor it by ensuring that your sacrifice meant something, that the bridge you built between our peoples becomes a road that both our civilizations can travel together. Marcus felt tears prickling at his eyes. Your Majesty, I don't need repayment. I just want our peoples to have a chance to know each other the way Lyra and I did, without politics, without fear, just genuine curiosity and mutual respect. Then that is what we shall build, the Empress said. She turned to address the full chamber. I decree that Princess Lyrakai will lead the Valkyrie Cultural Exchange Program, working directly with human liaisons to establish educational partnerships, research collaborations, and diplomatic channels. Dr. Chen will serve as humanity's primary liaison, if he is willing. Marcus glanced at Ambassador Okonkwo, who gave him a small nod. I'm willing, Your Majesty. Excellent. The Empress looked at Thuron. My son, you have raised legitimate concerns about security and transparency. Therefore, you will oversee the implementation of proper protocols and safeguards for this alliance. Your caution will balance your sister's enthusiasm. Together, you will ensure that this partnership serves the best interests of both our peoples. Thuron's patterns flickered through several colors before settling on resigned acceptance. As you command, Mother, the Empress smiled. This session is concluded. We will reconvene tomorrow to discuss the specific terms of the alliance. But for now, I believe my daughter and Dr. Chen have earned a moment of privacy. The council members began to file out, some looking pleased, others uncertain, but none openly defiant. The Empress's word was final. As the chamber emptied, Lyra descended from the center platform and approached Marcus. You called me out in front of the entire council, she said, but her patterns were warm gold, amused rather than angry. I called out the situation, Marcus corrected. And I think I just ended my diplomatic career before it really started. On the contrary, Ambassador Okonkwo said, gathering her materials. You did exactly what needed to be done. Sometimes diplomacy requires honesty more than politeness. She paused. Though perhaps warn me next time before you go off script. As Okonkwo left, Marcus and Lyra found themselves alone in the vast chamber. The crystal walls continued their slow color shifts, casting dancing patterns of light around them. I still can't believe this is real, Marcus said. Yesterday I was just a linguist. Today I'm apparently the key to interstellar relations. Yesterday you were a linguist who didn't remember saving a planet, Lyra said. Today you are simply yourself, complete and whole. How does it feel having all your memories back? Marcus considered the question. Strange. It's like I'm two people now, the Marcus who lived a normal life on Earth and the Marcus who spent months on Threshold with you. They're the same person, but the experiences are so different that sometimes I'm not sure which memories feel more real. Both are real, Lyra said gently. You do not have to choose between them. You can be both the cautious linguist and the reckless hero who jumped across the galaxy to save strangers. I wasn't reckless, Marcus protested. I calculated the odds very carefully before deciding to ignore them completely. Lyra's patterns shifted to a color that Marcus now recognized as laughter. Yes, very rational. That is exactly what I remember about you. They walked toward the chamber's observation window, which looked out over the Valkyrie capital city. It was night, and the city glowed with bioluminescent architecture, millions of lights in colors that Earth had no names for. In the distance, Marcus could see the crystal gardens that Lyra had described to him 12 years ago, singing their silent songs to the stars. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now we do what we promised," Lyra said. "We show our peoples what we discovered together, that the universe is bigger and better when shared. That different species can learn from each other, can build together, can become something greater than either could achieve alone. That's a lot of pressure for two people who mostly spent their time arguing about atmospheric chemistry. We also spent time watching bioluminescent forests and talking about philosophy and teaching each other to see the universe through different eyes," Lyra reminded him. "Those moments mattered too. Perhaps they mattered more." Marcus looked at her, at the gentle gold glow of her patterns, at the reflection of the city lights in her opalescent eyes. "I have a confession to make." "Another one?" Lyra's patterns rippled with amusement. "When my memories came back, I remembered something else. Something I didn't include in the neural scans I showed the council." "What?" "I remembered that the night before I left Threshold, I told you that if I somehow survived, if I made it back to human space, and you made it back to Valkara Prime, I would find a way to see you again. I promised that our story wasn't over, that it was just beginning." Lyra was quiet for a moment. "I remember that too. I thought you had forgotten." "I had, but now I remember, and I'm here and you're here, and against all possible odds, we kept that promise." "We did," Lyra agreed, "though it took 12 years and the fate of 2 civilizations to make it happen. Was it worth the wait?" Lyra turned to face him fully, her patterns shifting through golds and violets and colors Marcus was only beginning to understand. "Marcus Chen, you risked your life to save my world. You forgot everything we shared and still found your way back to me. You stood before the Imperial Council and defended not just yourself, but the possibility of connection between our peoples. You are exactly who I remembered, and so much more than I dared to hope. Is that a yes?" "That is a yes." They stood together at the window, looking out over a city that represented 50,000 years of Valkyrie civilization, and Marcus thought about all the twists and turns that had brought them to this moment. A malfunctioning jump drive, a crash landing, a princess who chose compassion over caution, a desperate attempt to save a dying world, 12 years of searching, and finally, impossibly, a reunion. "You know what the best part is?" Marcus said. "What?" "This is just the beginning. We have entire civilizations to introduce to each other, languages to share, cultures to exchange, discoveries to make together. The next few years are going to be absolutely chaotic." Lyra's patterns brightened. "I am looking forward to it." "Me too," Marcus said, and he realized he meant it completely. The fear and uncertainty of the past few days had faded, replaced by something he hadn't felt since those months on Threshold: genuine excitement about the future. Behind them, the chamber doors opened, and Ambassador Okonkwo returned with several human officials and Valkyrie administrators. "Dr. Chen, Princess Lyrakai, we need to begin planning the cultural exchange programs. There are about 10,000 details to work out, and the Empress wants preliminary proposals by tomorrow." Marcus and Lyra exchanged a look, their respective species versions of a smile. "Then we should get started," Lyra said. They left the observation window and joined the growing crowd of diplomats and administrators. As they worked through the night, planning exchange programs and research partnerships and cultural festivals, Marcus realized that this was exactly what he and Lyra had envisioned 12 years ago on that cliff edge on Threshold. Two peoples coming together, learning from each other, building something new and beautiful from their combined knowledge and perspectives. It wouldn't be easy. There would be misunderstandings and setbacks and moments when the cultural differences seemed insurmountable. Prince Thuron's faction would continue to resist, and there would be elements on Earth who feared the Valkyrie's superior technology. But none of that mattered as much as the simple truth that Marcus and Lyra had proven: connection was possible. As the sun began to rise over the Valkyrie capital, painting the crystal spires in shades of amber and rose, Marcus looked across the conference table at Lyra. She was deep in discussion with a human xenobiologist about establishing joint research stations, her patterns glowing with enthusiasm, and Marcus felt a profound sense of rightness about everything that had happened. He had lost years of his life to save a world he had never seen. He had forgotten the most important friendship he had ever formed. He had stumbled through a diplomatic crisis that could have started a war, but in the end, he had kept his promise. He had shown both their peoples that the universe was bigger and more wonderful when shared. And as Lyra caught his eye across the table and her patterns shifted to warm gold, Marcus knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Just as they had 12 years ago, when a human and a Valkyrie had looked at an impossible problem and decided to solve it anyway. The story of how humanity met the Valkyrie would be told for generations. But for Marcus and Lyra, it was simply the story of two people who chose connection over fear, who built bridges across the stars, and who proved that sometimes the most important thing you can do is reach out to someone different from yourself and say, "I see you, I value you, and I want to understand your world." That was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Not technology or weapons or conquest, but the simple, persistent belief that tomorrow could be better than today if people chose to work together. And in a universe vast and strange and full of wonders, that belief was the most powerful force of all.